Sarah thought she knew Michael. She thought she understood Josh. But the moment she discovered the hidden camera in her bathroom vent, everything she believed about her family shattered. Because what began as suspicion would unravel into a chilling web of surveillance betrayal and a horrifying truth hidden just behind the walls. Sarah Miller had always believed that life would slow down after 40. She imagined quiet mornings with coffee, a stable career working from home, and the companionship of her new husband, Michael. After years of being a single mum, marrying Michael felt like a second chance at happiness. He was calm, dependable, and comforting in ways her past relationships never were. He had one child from a previous relationship, an 18-year-old son named Josh. Sarah had only met him a few times during weekend visits, but he seemed polite and reserved, the kind of boy who kept to himself and rarely caused trouble. So when Michael suggested that Josh move in with them, she didn't object. She wanted to support her husband and thought maybe their home could provide Josh with a stable environment. Josh's mother had grown tired of his behavior, Michael explained. He had been skipping classes, staying out late, and getting into arguments at home. Sarah was reluctant at first. It wasn't the behavior that worried her. It was the feeling that she didn't really know Josh at all. But Michael reassured her. "He just needs structure," he said. "Our home can give him that." And so, Josh moved in. They lived in a cozy, two-story house nestled in a quiet Oregon suburb. Trees lined the sidewalks, neighbors waved from their porches, and the town was small enough that everyone knew everyone. It seemed like the perfect place to regroup, recharge, and rebuild. Sarah worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, spending long hours alone in the house while Michael was away at work. Josh enrolled in community college and picked up a part-time job at a local convenience store. In the beginning, things were mostly uneventful. Josh stayed in his room, only coming out to eat, study, or occasionally watch TV in the living room. He barely spoke to Sarah beyond the basics. "Hello? Thank you. Good night." At first, Sarah appreciated the space. She didn't want to overstep boundaries. But then, little things began to feel off. One morning, she woke up and noticed her closet door was open, even though she distinctly remembered shutting it the night before. Another day, she came out of the shower and found her bedroom window unlocked. She was sure she had closed it the previous afternoon. Once, she returned from walking the dog and saw the light in her office blinking as if someone had just turned it off. She dismissed it as forgetfulness or coincidence. She was working long hours and barely sleeping. Maybe she just needed rest. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. She often felt a presence, as if someone had just left the room or was observing her from behind. It wasn't strong at first, just a passing chill, a flicker of discomfort. Then it became more persistent. One afternoon, as she passed the hallway mirror, she swore she saw a shadow move behind her. She turned around, but nothing was there. She laughed it off, telling herself she was being dramatic. Living with a teenager she barely knew was an adjustment. Maybe her nerves were getting the better of her. Still, the unease lingered. She began double-checking locks, setting up timers on lights, and taking her laptop with her even on short errands. Sarah didn't say anything to Michael. He had been so relieved to have Josh under his roof again. She didn't want to seem paranoid or accusatory. The last thing she wanted was to create tension in their newly blended family. Weeks went by, and Josh remained as quiet and withdrawn as ever. But Sarah noticed he had a habit of lingering. He'd pass by her office more than necessary or stand just a moment too long in doorways. One night, she woke up to a creaking noise outside her bedroom door. She froze. Footsteps padded away down the hall. When she asked about it the next morning, Michael said it must have been the dog, but Sarah remembered clearly. Her dog had been curled up at her feet all night. She began locking her bedroom door at night. The turning point came one morning when she found a pair of black ankle socks beneath her bed. They weren't hers, and they didn't belong to Michael. She picked them up with trembling hands and turned them over. They were too large for her feet and had a small stitched logo she didn't recognize. Josh. That was the only explanation. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the socks in her hand. A knot formed in her stomach. Her home, once a safe, quiet place, now felt unfamiliar, invaded. That was the moment her uncertainty turned into suspicion. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The discovery of the socks left Sarah unsettled for days. She tried to find a rational explanation. Maybe the socks got mixed in with laundry. Maybe Michael borrowed a pair from Josh at some point and left them there by mistake. She wanted so badly to believe it was nothing. But the quiet tension in the house told a different story. Something beneath the surface was shifting, and she could feel it every time she walked past Josh's room or caught him glancing at her when he thought she wasn't tea-looking. After the sock incident, Sarah became hyper-aware of her surroundings. She started noticing patterns, subtle but consistent. Whenever she left a room, she'd return to find objects slightly out of place. A photo frame on her dresser tilted ever so slightly. A lipstick tube on the bathroom counter turned sideways. The screen brightness on her laptop adjusted lower than she ever set it. It was as if someone was entering her private spaces when she wasn't looking, touching her things and then carefully trying to hide the evidence. One afternoon, while cleaning the bathroom, she caught something that made her stomach lurch. She was scrubbing the floor when she looked up and saw the small vent above the shower head. It had always been there, an ordinary ceiling fixture meant for air circulation, but now something about it felt off. She stood on a stool to get a closer look. The screws were slightly loosened. The slats of the vent were crooked, not sitting evenly in the frame. She narrowed her eyes, her breath catching in her throat. Peering into the darkness behind the vent, she caught a faint metallic glint. Her heart pounded. She climbed down, fetched a flashlight, and shone it into the gap. The light reflected off something small and round. It was a lens. Hidden in the vent was a tiny camcorder, no bigger than her palm. Sarah stepped back, her entire body trembling. Someone had been watching her, recording her. In the one place she should have felt completely alone. For a few minutes, she couldn't move. She stared at the vent, struggling to process what she'd found. Then she grabbed her phone and called the police. They arrived within the hour. She showed them the vent, the lens, and explained everything she had noticed over the past few weeks. The officers examined the area and carefully removed the device. It had been expertly concealed, taped inside the wall with a hole drilled to give the lens a clear view into the bathroom. It was the kind of setup that took planning, not a random act. They asked if anyone else had access to the house. Sarah explained that only she, Michael, and Josh lived there. The officers took the camcorder into evidence and said they would run tests on it, including checking the memory card for footage. They asked if she had any suspicions. Her mouth went dry. She hesitated, then quietly mentioned Josh's name. But because the camera was found in a shared home and no direct evidence yet pointed to a specific person, the police couldn't make an arrest. Sarah felt a sickening mix of relief and dread. On one hand, she wasn't imagining things. On the other, the intruder was still under her roof. Michael returned home the next day from a business trip. Sarah told him everything. He looked stunned, concerned, and immediately blamed Josh's troubled past. "He's been struggling," he said, rubbing his forehead. "Maybe he did something stupid." But something about his reaction didn't sit right with her. He was too calm, too controlled, as if he already had an answer prepared. Sarah tried to act normal, but inside, she was unraveling. She started locking every door behind her. She checked every vent, light fixture, and closet for more hidden devices. Her home no longer felt like a sanctuary. It was a stage. And someone was behind the curtain, watching her every move. Determined to protect herself, Sarah waited until Josh left for his afternoon class. Then she opened the hallway closet and pried back the panel that led to the narrow crawl space running behind the bathroom wall. Armed with gloves and a flashlight, she climbed inside. The crawl space was dark, dusty, and silent. After a few feet, she found what she was looking for. A tangled mess of wires taped along the wooden beams, leading to a small recording device tucked inside an old cardboard box. Her hands shook as she pulled it out. The camera had been running for weeks. She found extra batteries, several memory cards, and a small notebook filled with scrawled notes and times. Log entries, most likely. Sarah sat on the floor, frozen. The air felt heavier than ever. Someone had been inside the walls of her house, documenting her life without her knowing. She knew this wasn't random. It was calculated. And whoever was responsible had been planning it for a long time. For the first time since Josh moved in, she truly feared what she might discover next. Sarah turned the small memory card over in her hand, its plastic edges dusty and slightly warm from the camera it had been pulled from. She slipped it into a Ziploc bag and stared at the rest of the items: spare batteries, tangled cords, labeled cards. It was too much for a teenage prank. This was a system, a process. Someone had carefully, patiently built a routine around violating her privacy. The crawl space behind her bathroom wall had become a surveillance hub, and she had been the subject. The following morning, she delivered the evidence to the police station. The officers accepted the items and promised to expedite the analysis. They were visibly disturbed by the scale of what she had brought. She left the station with a quiet desperation. Every second back at home felt like she was being watched again, even though the camera was gone. She couldn't sleep that night. She sat in the living room, staring at the hallway, imagining wires pulsing with power in the walls. Josh's room was just down the hall. His door was shut. 2 days later, Sarah got a call from the detective. The footage on the memory cards was extensive. There were hours, days of recordings. Some files had been labeled with dates and times. Others were continuous streams of raw footage. Most chilling was the content. Scenes of Sarah in the shower, dressing, sleeping, pacing her room during long workdays, talking to herself on calls. The invasion of privacy was absolute. The detective's voice grew quiet over the phone as he explained that many of the files had been manually accessed and organized, indicating that whoever placed the camera had been actively reviewing and cataloging the footage. They traced the purchase of the camcorder and accessories to an online account. It didn't take long to identify the buyer, Josh Miller. The items had been shipped to a P.O. box registered under his name. The camera model, the specific type of SD cards, even the tape used to mount the lens, all matched the packaging found hidden in his closet. Police obtained a warrant and searched Josh's room while he was at school. What they found confirmed their worst fears. His laptop contained a backup folder filled with video files named with eerie precision. Bathroom night 1, bedroom afternoon, office, sitting. There were even notes stored in a digital notepad where timestamps were logged and organized by room. The level of detail was disturbing. He had been watching Sarah from nearly every angle for weeks. Even more unsettling were the signs that her laptop had also been compromised. Tech experts discovered spyware installed on her device, which had been used to mirror her screen remotely. Someone had been watching not only through cameras, but also through her computer, observing her emails, video calls, and private messages. Passwords had been copied. Files had been opened and viewed without her ever noticing. She had been under complete digital surveillance. Josh was brought in for questioning. He denied everything at first, insisting he knew nothing about the cameras or the files. But confronted with the evidence, his purchase history, the video files on his laptop, the spyware, his story began to shift. He eventually claimed that the footage wasn't his, that someone else had set him up. He said he'd only moved the files because he was curious, that he hadn't placed the cameras himself. The excuses were weak and inconsistent. But then came a discovery that changed the course of the investigation. Some of the earliest videos found on the laptop were dated weeks before Josh had even moved into the house. Sarah had assumed the spying began once he arrived, but the files told a different story. Footage existed from months earlier, clips showing her working in the kitchen, taking walks in the backyard, and lounging in the living room during quiet evenings. At first, Sarah thought maybe the dates had been mislabeled, but investigators confirmed it. Metadata, timestamps, file creation logs, they all aligned. These videos predated Josh's arrival. The implications hit Sarah like a wave. Josh might have expanded the operation, but he hadn't started it. Someone else had been watching her long before he moved in. And whoever that person was had access to her home, her devices, and her life, long before she had any reason to be suspicious. The question was no longer just who had placed the cameras, but who had taught Josh how to do it. And Sarah's mind turned to Michael. Sarah sat in her car outside the police station, her hands gripping the steering wheel, unable to start the engine. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts as the detective's words echoed in her mind. The footage began before Josh moved in. The timeline didn't match the narrative she had believed, had wanted to believe. Someone else had planted those first cameras, someone with access, someone she trusted. Her thoughts raced to Michael. He had been the one who convinced her to let Josh stay. He had brushed off her early concerns. He had been oddly calm when she discovered the first camera. Now that she thought about it, he never once suggested calling the police. He had simply said it was probably Josh, and left it at that. At the time, she'd accepted it. She'd been too overwhelmed to ask why her husband wasn't more outraged. Now it made a chilling kind of sense. Detectives had quietly begun to investigate Michael after discovering the timeline discrepancy. When they subpoenaed his digital accounts, things escalated quickly. His email history revealed purchases of surveillance devices similar to the one found in the bathroom. Some of the transactions had been made under a different name, but used the same credit card. A fake online profile had been linked to a shared IP address, his and Josh's. The cloud storage account containing backups of the videos was another nail in the coffin. It had been accessed from both Josh's laptop and Michael's phone. Though the files were organized and updated by Josh more recently, Michael had created the account months earlier. Data logs proved that Michael had been the one who set up the initial camera, uploading the first wave of footage from Sarah's office and bedroom. This wasn't a teenager acting alone. It was a coordinated effort. The investigators were stunned. Michael had no prior criminal history. He had a respected job, a clean background, and was known in the community. But behind closed doors, he had spent months orchestrating a network of secret surveillance on his own wife. And somehow, he had involved his son in the process. Sarah was devastated. She had married this man, welcomed his child into her home, and tried to build a future with him. Now, everything felt like a lie. The police brought Michael in for questioning. At first, he denied everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. When confronted with logs, purchases, and cloud access timestamps, his composure began to crack. Slowly, over hours of interrogation, the truth emerged. Michael admitted to placing the first camera. It began, he said, out of curiosity. He claimed he was trying to understand her better, to see how she spent her time when he was away. But curiosity quickly turned into obsession. He wanted to know everything: what she wore, what she looked at on her laptop, who she talked to. He became addicted to watching, to knowing more than he was ever meant to. Then, when Josh moved in, Michael didn't stop. Instead, he saw an opportunity. He subtly encouraged Josh to help him, planting the idea of monitoring the house for safety. Josh, eager to bond with his distant father, complied. What began as simple home monitoring spiraled into invasive surveillance. Josh learned how to set up hidden cameras and install tracking software. Michael provided the tools, the instructions, and the justification. Sarah learned all of this through the case updates. The betrayal was almost too much to bear. The man she had trusted to protect her had orchestrated her violation. The son she had tried to accept into her home had participated willingly. They had turned her life into a private performance, recording her without consent, reviewing her every move like she was nothing more than a character on a screen. Michael was charged with multiple crimes, including unlawful surveillance, coercion, and criminal conspiracy. Josh faced similar charges, with prosecutors debating whether to try him as an adult. Sarah gave her full cooperation to law enforcement, offering testimony, providing additional digital evidence, and helping them piece together the timeline of the abuse. Each new detail drove home the chilling truth. This wasn't just a story about a teenager's bad choices. It was a family conspiracy, a sick, calculated invasion led by the very person who had sworn to love and protect her. Sarah moved out of the house the day Michael was arrested. She never stepped foot in it again. Sarah spent the first week after leaving her home in a modest, furnished apartment just outside town. The walls were bare, the furniture impersonal, but it was quiet and safe. Two things she no longer took for granted. Every sound still startled her. The buzz of the refrigerator made her flinch. Shadows on the wall made her pause. She changed her phone, her laptop, and every online password she'd ever used. Even then, the sense of exposure lingered, as if invisible eyes still trailed her every step. Trust, she realized, had been completely dismantled. The community reacted with shock when the story broke. News outlets picked up the case quickly, drawn to the disturbing twist: a husband secretly spying on his wife, a stepson complicit in the scheme. Michael's face appeared on the evening news, his mugshot frozen under bold headlines: "Local man and son charged in voyeurism conspiracy." Neighbors were stunned. He had been so ordinary, so stable, always the one organizing barbecues or offering to mow elderly neighbors' lawns. That made the betrayal all the more disturbing. It didn't fit into any familiar pattern. It wasn't rage or jealousy or greed. It was control, twisted into obsession. Sarah cooperated fully with prosecutors as the legal process moved forward. She testified in court, calmly detailing the series of events, the strange noises, the vent, the socks, the crawl space. She recounted how she had blamed herself for weeks, questioning her instincts while the invasion deepened. The defense tried to minimize Josh's involvement, portraying him as manipulated by his father, a vulnerable young man pulled into something he didn't fully understand. But the evidence told a harsher story. He had logged hours of footage. He had created his own video labels. He had installed software on her devices. Whatever his reasons, he had made choices, deliberate, repeated ones. Michael eventually took a plea deal, admitting guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Josh, given his age and the influence of his father, was offered a deal as well. 3 years in a youth correctional facility followed by court-mandated therapy and digital monitoring. Sarah didn't attend Josh's sentencing. She had no more room for anger. She had nothing left to say to either of them. After the trial, Sarah decided not to return to her old life. She sold the house and quit her freelance job. The place where she had once felt safe was now just a hollow stage where her privacy had been stolen. She packed what little she wanted to keep and moved to a new city, one where no one knew her name or her story. It was the only way she could breathe again. Starting over didn't mean forgetting, it meant surviving. In time, she began to rebuild. She found a therapist who specialized in trauma. She started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. Art gave her a way to speak when words failed. Each canvas was a quiet protest against what had been done to her, a reminder that her story belonged to her again. She eventually got a rescue dog, a nervous little thing with big eyes who refused to leave her side. They were healing together. She joined an online support group for victims of digital abuse and voyeurism. It shocked her how many people had similar stories, stories that never made the news, stories dismissed by friends or authorities. Sarah shared hers anonymously at first. Then, months later, she allowed her name to be included in a documentary raising awareness about the rise in surveillance abuse within domestic spaces. It was terrifying to go public, but also freeing. She was no longer hiding. She was taking control. Years later, Sarah still had moments when she checked behind vents or covered her laptop camera out of habit. The paranoia faded slowly, but it never fully disappeared. That was the price of being betrayed by someone you love. It didn't just wound you. It rewired how you see the world. Her story, though dark, became a warning and a lifeline for others. It reminded people that real danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it wears the face of someone you sleep beside, and it doesn't need a weapon to hurt you. Sometimes, all it needs is silence, a camera, and the belief that no one will ever find out. But someone did, and Sarah made sure the world heard what happened.